Okay, my name's Joe Haight. I'm part of the math department here. I'm going to be talking to you guys today about what your kid is into with the Go Math. So the whole system and the whole, kind of all the resources that we have. Just to let you know, if you're a note taker, we are going to post this to the parent portal, this PowerPoint. So you can just pay attention, you don't have to write everything down. Alrighty. So this is what the cover of your child's math book looks like in 3rd and 7th grade, and then the 8th grade one is green. But everything that I'm going to say for 7th grade is true of the 8th grade version as well. Just different content, obviously. Okay, so I'm going to go over 3 main topics with you guys. The first is the hard copy resources that your child actually received at the beginning of the year. We're going to talk about the textbook, what's in it, how it's laid out, where the answers can be found, that kind of thing. We'll talk about the Practice and Skills Fluency Workbook. This is the little consumable floppy book that they got. And we'll talk about kind of how that correlates with the textbook lessons. And we'll talk about what students actually keep with them and what we generally keep in the classroom. Then we'll talk about student assessment. So what is your kid going to be quizzed or tested on? How often and kind of that kind of stuff. And then finally, the online resources that the publisher gives us. We'll talk about those things as well. And I'll show you guys a little demo of that website too. Alrighty, so we're going to start with the hard copy resources, and specifically we'll start with the textbook. In the textbook, I actually have some copies. Sir, if you wouldn't mind, could you pass out some of those books back there? Thank you. So we're going to start with the big, what we call the textbook, the biggest of the consumable books. Right away, there's obviously a table of contents that you can probably figure out. The bulk of the book is the course contents themselves, so the material that your child's learning. And then behind all of that stuff, there are the selected answers, and those are on pages, it starts on SA1, and that's behind page 430. That'll be in the thick book, so maybe like if you sat next to somebody that has one of the thick books, I can only get 4. So there are selected answers. Some teachers give this portion to the students to have them put it in their binder. Some teachers give this portion to the students to have them put in their binders. I don't do that. Every teacher's a little bit different. I post all of my solutions on Schooloop. So one way or another, your child most likely has access to these solutions. But they are in the book. And it's just your typical back of the book stuff, like the odds for most sections and that kind of stuff. Behind that, there's a glossary that defines some of the terms that we use in the book. A lot of us teachers have the students tear this out and keep it in their binder with them. And finally, there's an index and formula sheet, which is just kind of like a reference sheet in the back. So it's a pretty typical textbook. It just happens to be consumable. So the kids actually write in the book. So that's like the big difference. Can I answer any questions about the textbook itself, like the fat textbook that you have? There'll be time for questions at the end as well. Okay, this looks scary, but it really isn't that bad. We don't do chapters anymore. It's not how it's laid out. It's laid out into units. So I used Unit 2 as an example because it's a little bit shorter, easier to fit on a slide. So Unit 2 is the big, broad set of topics. And so for Unit 2 in the 7th grade book, it's ratios and proportional relationships. That's the big topic. And they break these big units down into modules. So in the case of Unit 2, there's 2 modules that it breaks down to. These are just a little bit more specific. So if Module 4 is ratios and proportionality, that's part of this concept. They break it down into a smaller piece, and then the modules themselves are broken up into a number of lessons, typically 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lessons. In this case, Module 4 has 3 lessons in it, and then when you're done with that, you move on to Module 5, and that has 3 lessons in it. So if your child is on Lesson 4.2, that means it's Module 4, Lesson 2, Module 4, Lesson 3, Module 5, Lesson 1, that kind of thing. That's how they're set up. So I'll be referring back to this when we talk about when students are assessed. But we don't do chapters anymore. I guess that was too easy. So we had to confuse things with unit, module, and lesson. So if I can answer any questions at the end, let me know. But it's pretty straightforward once you kind of wrap your brain around it. All right. The next thing that your student has is that small consumable workbook. That's the really floppy, skinny book. This is essentially just a collection of extra practice. They're just extra problems. Most of them are procedural, so just dry math problems. These are generally given as homework. Certainly all of the 7th grade teachers give these as homework almost exclusively. So we'll operate out of the textbook during class, and then usually give these as homework, just because it's extra problems that we don't have to make up. And there are 2 worksheets in that book for every lesson in the textbook. So if we go back to this chart, lesson 4.1 in the textbook is correlated with 2 worksheets in that book. So there's a worksheet AB, and then there's a reteach one. So for every lesson, you get 2 worksheets, and they're labeled just the same. So if this lesson is called lesson 4.1 unit rates, at the top of the worksheets, it will say lesson 4.1 skills and practice, and there's 2 sheets for that. So they correlate really smoothly. It makes it really easy for us to assign this homework. And the availability of solutions for this varies by teacher. Unfortunately, the publisher didn't give us an answer key just for that. So we can't, there's no resource we can post, so teachers handle that different ways. I personally take my teacher answer key and crop pieces out of it and post that on School Loop. Other teachers post them in the classroom, like as a list over there. Some teachers go over the answers, it just kind of depends. So that's specific to your child's teacher. Can I answer any questions right now about the skinny workbook? Not so much? Yes?
Is this what they're taking home, or is this for the in-class?
We are going to get to that in just a minute. So that's kind of a complicated answer.
Okay.
Okay. What resources does my student have in their math binder? That's the next slide. Students tear out the parts of the textbook and the Skills and Practice Fluency book that we're using at the time. So for example, now in my 7th grade classes, we're still in Unit 1. So for example, they will tear out all of Unit 1 from the textbook, put that in their binder. They'll tear out all of the worksheets that correlate to the Unit 1 lessons from that book and put that in their binder. So they have all of the course content text from Unit 1, and they have all of the Skills and Fluency worksheets from Unit 1 in their binder. We also have them tear out the glossary section of the textbook, put that in their binder, and some teachers had the kids tear out the selected answer section as well. I didn't do that because I just posted my answers on School Loop, but this, again, varies by teacher. And teachers generally keep everything else in the room. There are some teachers that keep that stuff, that have the kid keep it at home. That seems like a roll of the dice to me.
Yeah.
And so I don't do that. You can see all mine are stacked in the back of the room. So we just keep it safe. That way if a kid loses their binder, we're only out that unit, and they can print the resources from home, and I'll show you guys how to do that later. And then, hey, it's no big deal. When we start Unit 2, now you have your hard copy again. I can give you that. Okay? Can I answer any questions about what the kid has with them? No. All right. Last resource that the publisher gave us is an online website that basically has everything that you have in front of you, plus some extra online help kind of stuff. So every single student is registered on here. They all have an account. So if you go to my.hrw.com, their username is their student ID number, and the password is just the word school. So every kid is registered, their teacher registered them individually. And the publisher's website contains a whole bunch of resources, and I'll show you these, like the principal big 3. Replacement textbook pages is big, because if they lose their book, they need to print new pages out, because we write in them every day. They give you videos of problems being worked out for every single lesson. One of the authors, Dr. Berger, works problems out. And there are extra practice and step-by-step tutorials that they give as well. And I'll show you guys where to find all that stuff here in just a minute. So I'm going to go back to the computer, I'm going to log on, and I'll put it right up here on the screen so you guys can take a look. Okay, so here's what the website looks like. And your student will put in their student ID, but I had to make a sample kid, so this is why it's a different name. So it's a Joe sample is the kid's name, that's why it says hi Joe. So this is what your kid will see when they log on, and the ones in yellow are what we're going to look at first. So student addition and resources. These are PDF files of every section in your textbook from start to finish. So if you lose part of it, like I said, you can click on like Module 3, and here's exactly what your child has in hard copy, just as a PDF. And you can print whatever pages you need. The only caution I have for you is that the page numbers for the document do not match the page numbers down here. So for example, this is page 3 in the document, but it's page 59 in the textbook, so just pay attention to what you're printing. And this is, again, exactly what the kids get. Also on that page, if Spanish is helpful, we have the whole book in Spanish. math on the spot videos. So if you click on this, every single lesson and every single example is given. So say you're on lesson 3-4 and your child doesn't understand example 1, you can click on that and it'll come up with a guy in a funny tie who'll do a math problem for you and kind of explain how it works. So that's pretty handy. And then there's also Are You Ready? So for every module, these are basic skill builders if your kid is kind of lacking in some essential skill that they covered in elementary school. Those are there as well. The next part we're going to look at is the Student Online Edition. So if you click on that, this looks just like your child's book, except that the links are clickable. So you go to Contents and say we're in Unit 1. Unit 1, Module 1, wherever it is. So you pick whatever part of the book you're in, and you can go to that, and now the book is clickable. So it'll show you the problems bigger so you can type in them. And when you get down to the examples, example 1, and your child says, Mom or Dad, I have no idea what this means. There's the Math on the Spot video where the guy works it out for you. You can click on that. There's animated math. And this one's big right here, this little link. It says Personal Math Trainer. If you click on that, now it has example problems that your child can work out. It'll give you another example, video tutor that'll show you how to do it. It'll show you step by step. It'll check their work. So this is just a big repository of extra step-by-step explained problems. This is where I will tell you to go if you say your child needs extra help. So there's that resource there. And then finally, the Interactive Student Edition. This is where they take every lesson and break it down into the different pieces. So say you're on Module 2. You can pick a lesson that your child's having difficulty with. So, hey, my kid can't divide integers. So you click on that. It's going to be loud. And it gives you a little video and breaks it down.
How do you divide integers?
Into every part of the book. So explore, explain. It breaks everything down into small pieces. So that can be very handy also. So those are like the big resources you get with the book, and every kid can log on to this and get this from home. And the computer lab here, and they can print from the computer lab if they're missing a page. Can I answer any questions about the website?
When you were logging in, is the password actually school
Yes.
initially?
It wasn't for mine because I had to do a sample, but yes, your child's will be. So when they log in, their student ID will be 997, whatever it happens to be, and then you just type school and it'll pop right up. And we chose the book that correlates to the kids. So, yes, ma'am.
Have all the students been on this website?
I don't know not in the math classes.
Okay.
We have demoed it for them, so I showed them exactly what I just showed you guys, and most teachers have done that, but we haven't sat them down with Chromebooks and had them log on yet. But any student that I've had that's lost their binder has done this and printed it out, no problem. All right, the last thing I'm going to talk to you guys about is student assessment, so how we quiz and test your child and when we do it and what the topics are. Typically, and this is true for most of us math teachers, students are generally quizzed after each module, and then there's a test at the end of the unit. So here's a timeline. I apologize, it's small. I had to fit it all on here for Unit 1. Each of these lessons in a normally paced class usually is 2 days. So you spend 2 days on 1-1, 2 days on 2-2, and so on. When you get to the end of that block, the end of Module 1, you'll take a Module 1 quiz, and it covers everything in that module. Then you move on to Module 2, you do 2-1, 2-2, 2-3. Again, this would take about 6 days, give or take. And then you take the Module 2 quiz, and then at the end of that, there's Module 3, and that rounds out Unit 1. And so then we give them the Unit 1 test at the end of that that covers all of this, recaps everything. So we don't quiz them on Module 3, and then turn around the next day and test them on Unit 1. We find that redundant. So we just, everything from this is just lumped in here. So this can get rather lengthy in between assessments sometimes. So you'll probably notice that you're just seeing homework scores on the school loop, and then all of a sudden, bang, there's a test, and my kid's grade changed drastically. That will happen. Our department policy here at Albiani is that assessments have to be at least 70 or 75% of the grade. So that's why. I mean, they can do their homework for a whole month, and then do poorly on a quiz, and their grade will drop significantly. So just be aware of that. It was on the syllabus and all that stuff. But if you have any questions, you can definitely ask your student's teacher, and they can explain that way to you. Can I answer any questions? I had to talk pretty fast, I feel like. Did any of that make sense, or can I? I'm happy to answer questions. We have a little bit of time now. I can go back to any slides. Yeah?
Do you know if all the grades are the same in the Go Math website, like for 4th grade, 5th grade?
I don't have any experience with the elementary school versions, but I would assume, I don't know what resources specifically the elementary school kids get, but I would assume they get a thick textbook and a thin workbook. So I would assume it'll be the same. Mhm. Any other questions? I would caution you against asking me specifics for your child's class unless I have your child in my class, just because every teacher does things a little bit differently, as I'm sure you're aware. And so they post answers differently and all that kind of stuff. So but School Loop email is by far the best way to get a hold of your teacher and ask, say, hey, where are the answers to this, or how can my student check their work, or how did my kid go from a 95 to a 65%? We get a lot of questions like that. So any other questions I can answer?
No.
No? All right, that felt like a whirlwind to me. I
But
think,
it's being taped.
Yeah,
It'll be online, so you can watch it again, if you didn't get any of that. It
And-
went all over your head.
and like I said, this PowerPoint will be on the portal as well, so when you go to find the video, if you choose to, this will be there as well, so you can kind of go through it. And feel free to email me too. My name's Joe Haight. You can email me on School Loop or through the district email, and if you have any questions, like general Go Math questions, I can answer those for you.